Stipe Miocic did an interview and he was explaining. And he was defending. I didn't think it was fair. I didn't think it was fair the position Stipe got put in. Stipe was speaking to people who have said that he's holding up the division. I don't know how. And this isn't because I like Stipe. By the way, let me just look at this objectively. I don't know how. Stipe was ready to fight. He was ready to fight in November of last year at Madison Square Garden. Jon Jones got hurt. Now, if you'll remember, they held an interim championship fight. Sergey Pavlich was the backup fighter when it was Jon Jones and Stipe. So it would seem to you that Stipe would go in against Pavlich, and then if we could do an interim title like that, that's a conversation that'll have to happen. But it turned out it did happen. It was for an interim title. So it looks like it would be Stipe versus Pavlich. Now, I'm backing up to November of last year. It was Dana that came out and said we didn't even offer it to him. They asked him why. And Dana said, that's disrespectful. While Sergey Pavlich looks red hot and has got a beautiful record and people are talking about him, Stipe is the most successful heavyweight fighter we have ever had, who is getting ready to go against possibly the best fighter we have ever had at the Mecca for the strap. I'm going to change all of those ingredients. A different opponent, I'm going to change everything and not even put up the same belt that he, no, I'm going to hold it and we're going to go through with what we told our most successful heavyweight ever. Great. That made a lot of sense. But if it didn't, if you had a problem with it, that was the time to speak. And nobody did. The media in the room accepted it. And I'm only telling you that because now here we are later, and there's a new guy that's emerged. It wasn't even the guy that night who was Sergey Pavlich. There's a new guy. His name's Tom Aspinall. But on top of Tom Aspinall, there is now a real interesting, right? And whoever comes in last always has the advantage over the guy that was long. So now you got the new fresh face in town, which is Alex Pereira, who, by the way, is not even in the division. So it's kind of this weird talk amongst fans, but because of that, before we can get to who it's going to be between Tom, who, by the way, has to deal with Blades first, weird conversation we're even having, or if we can get Pereira in there, who, by the way, is not even in the division, we have to get the business done with Stipe, and therefore Stipe is the one holding things up. And I'm like, man, I could barely follow that. I could barely follow that to even explain to you guys. So, I don't want that to be there. And if you ever run into Stipe, I imagine you would look at him and you're intimidated, right? Heavyweight champion of the world. But if you ever see him, if you're somewhere in Vegas, you go, hey, that guy looks like Stipe. I wonder if it is. Go say hi. You won't regret that you did. He's extremely approachable. And then ask him something you want to ask him. And you want to know who did that over the weekend? In Vegas, my father-in-law, Steve, walked right up to him. Had never met him before. Introduced himself. Asked Stipe a couple of questions. Stipe didn't know he was like my father-in-law or anything. It was nothing like that. It was a guy that had come up and spoke to him. Well, that's what Stipe was down there for. He was down there to speak to people. One of the things that Steve asked him is, what are you weighing? And I am very interested in that myself. I told you that when I reached out to Stipe, which is his wife, she had shared this with me, but I'm going back, guys, 3 years. Don't forget where we left off. Stipe did not leave the octagon the last time with a plan to fight Jon Jones. Stipe lost his title. Stipe's very last fight. He lost his title to Francis Ngannou. Now, while Francis never defended that title, is that accurate? No, it's not, is it? He did defend it against Surreal. While Francis never defended that title against Stipe, it was believed that that's where they were going, and it was believed they were going in that direction because now you have a true trilogy fight. Stipe won one, Francis won one. But one thing that was very meaningful is the night Stipe beat Francis, he weighed 246 pounds. You fast forward the tape all those years later, Stipe weighed in at 233 pounds. I couldn't figure it out myself. It's one of the reasons that I went to his wife in the first place. Like, hey, what's going on? And you hear a story about these guys. Oh, I got on this new diet, or I'm doing these new greens, or I've turned vegan. Whatever it might be, when a guy's physiology changes to that degree, there's an explanation. Stipe didn't have one. And believe me, Stipe 1 would have told you guys through the media, but she would have told me. Even if she swore me to secret, she would have told me. No, it was nothing like that. He didn't change anything. His weight had just come off. Like, he's working so hard, and then, apparently wasn't putting enough calories in. Like, it wasn't even a thought. And they didn't care. They didn't mind. He was plenty strong. Conditioning was good. They didn't really think much of it. But when it's done, you don't get the result that you want. You start to turn to the numbers and go, is there anything here that jumps off the page? And that was what jumped off the page. Stipe felt like, man, I wasn't enough man. I felt him out there. I never thought I was too small. And then I got in there with Francis. And very typically our heavyweights, 233 would be a small heavyweight champion. But he's still in the ballpark. Mike Tyson was 220, even if that's boxing. Muhammad Ali was 198. Cain Velasquez, a smaller heavyweight, 240. Randy Couture, smaller heavyweight, 228. I'm just Fedor Emelianenko, 240. You're right. Stipe's right in there. But then sometimes you have that different kind of guy. You have a Tyson Fury that's barely making the weight limit. You have a Brock Lesnar. You have a Francis Ngannou. So Stipe said, here's what I'm going to do. I know I'm getting the third fight. That's what makes sense with a trilogy. I got to put some size on. All right, somewhere along that journey, Francis exits stage left. Jon Jones emerges. And one of the things with Jon Jones, in fact, the entire thing with Jon Jones, for going up to heavyweight, is he will be spotting the opponent in advantage. He's going to spot him right off the bat. And you got to fill in the blank, right? I mean, it goes all the way up to 265. In some jurisdictions, it's 285. Versus what Jon's going to be able to get himself up to. And when he went out against Ciryl Gane, that narrative just didn't exist. They were only separated by a few pounds. And I do like the idea. I think that Jon's right. You are giving the guy an advantage. And for us to have that storyline and or enjoy it in any kind of way, we've got to be able to see it. So if Jon gets on that scale around that 232, 234, and Stipe gets on there around that 255, it's very interesting. At any rate, my father-in-law went up and said, what are you weighing? And the answer, if you see Stipe, looks great, right? Weight all isn't the same. Guy put on 20 pounds. Sometimes that's terrible news. But this is very different. This was a guy that was already there. He had lost the weight. Now he's trying to put it back on. And 251 was the answer, with 251 pounds. But don't forget, it's not a situation where you go into training camp and the weight comes off. That can most certainly happen, but Stipe's been ready, right? I mean, he had to get ready. He didn't quite know when Jon was going to come back. Now it looks as though we've got an answer, a specific answer. November this year, Madison Square Garden, main event, heavyweight championship. Everything that we had planned last year, we're just going to do it 1 year later, all the way down to the month. And it would seem to me, right, you talk about advantages, and people are very quick to talk about Jon is the greatest. That's true. But the most decorated heavyweight, and decorated and greatest are two different conversations, but you see where they're pretty close. That's Stipe, and that's quantifiable. And it would seem to me that Stipe has had an advantage because Jon's injury was very real. Like, there's not a situation where he could go in and be active and be busy, which is a chance for him to digress and Stipe to surpass. So let's just see where that goes. We've got a date. We got a fight. Everybody's healthy. Everything's coming around. Let's leave this other stuff out because it's weird and it's not true. It just simply isn't true. And while Stipe is an underdog, if he's to beat Jon, not only will what you're saying now, and I'm telling you it's not true, it will then be proven. You will then look like a fool, right? Like Stipe holding up all these things that you're saying to bring in this new guy, or to bring in this. If Stipe beats him, it's now proven that he didn't hold it up. It's now proven that was the right fight. I'm just sharing for you, before you get lost in any of that, this is a time of celebration. If you're a fight fan, if you like the perennial division, which is the heavyweights, this is a good news day. Stipe's 251, he's healthy. Jon Jones is healthy, he's back in training. The organization's got him a date, November this year, MSG. The positive time. So don't get lost in the message.